Any fan of martial arts will know of Miyamoto Musashi, the Japanese swordsman from the 1600s that pioneered ichi-ryu, or the Way of Two Swords, as it is known in the West. Musashi is the author of the Book of Five Rings, which is ubiquitous in the study of the fine art of violence for centuries now. Even today, modern fighters study his writings alongside Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Hey guys, before we get into this episode, please, I beg of you, show me some grace. I'm just this guy from South Louisiana who can barely speak English trying to pronounce these Japanese names and words. I butcher a lot of them, and if you're the family of these people and I disrespect you by mispronouncing the name, I humbly apologize. I hope the story itself is what is the attention here and not my terrible Japanese pronunciations. Ichi-ryu may seem mythical and something from a long gone age, but the practice is still practiced in Japan to this day. Musashi handed down what is called a Soke title to students that would lead his school of teachings in the future. Born in 1584, Miyamoto Musashi was born into a turbulent time in Japan and was on the tail end of reuniting under two warlords named Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Oda Nobunaga. But shortly after, Japan would enter the Edo period and be controlled by the Tokugawa shogunate. Musashi got his love of violence from his father, Shimemunensai. He was a martial artist and expert in the sword and the jute, another weapon from Japan's Edo period. As Musashi went through life, he developed his style of fighting with two swords, ichi-ryu, and won duel after duel. It is said that at the end of his career, he would rack up an impressive undefeated record of 61 wins with no defeats. But those duels will be a story for another time, perhaps a prequel to this video. I want to start off our journey in the week of June 5th, 1695. Musashi was near the end of his life in June of 1695. After a lifetime of swordsmanship, Buddhist practice, philosophy, and art, Musashi was finally given in to thoracic cancer. He knew his teachings should last the ages. In May of that year, Hyugo Province's lord ordered Tarao to send to Musashi until the end of his life. Kyumen Soke and his brother Tarao Menongojo went to their teacher's aid. A week before his passing, Musashi approached Magonjo with the Hyoshuren Kaijo, which is the 35 Articles of Strategy, and passed the knowledge on. Musashi also approached his best student, Tarao Kumanosaki, and gave him his two swords with a certificate to transfer Musashi's school. Tarao was overwhelmed but did not feel worthy and instead gifted the honor to Musashi's adopted son, Miyamoto Iori. But being taught by Musashi his whole life, Iori knew that it was Tarao that was the chosen one to lead the school by the leader and founder himself. He gladly held the name Miyamoto live on, but the school he felt was better in Tarao's hands. Iori said that following response to Tarao's offer: "I can be the heir to the name and warrior's honor of Musashi, but I cannot take on the succession of his school. It is my wish that you, to whom Musashi passed on this art, succeed him. Please be kind enough to accept." Unfortunately, Mangonojo passed away before passing on the 35 Articles, and his brother took leadership of the school. Kumanosaki was a well-known warrior before he made the leader of Ichi-ryu. In 1638, he fought at the Shimabara Rebellion. The daimyo of the Shimabara domain drastically raised taxes and violently prohibited Christianity. As a group of Catholic peasants and Ronin rose up, the Tokugawa shogunate sent 125,000 troops and the Dutch East India Company to suppress and ultimately defeat the rebels. Kumanosaki fought at the battle and received gold and a robe for his service. As the years went on, Kumanosaki had several different children. Of his 6 sons, 5 of them all practiced the art of 2 swords as one. But it was his 4th son, Teranomobori, who was particularly adept at the art. Like his master before him, Tadao Soke passed Miyamoto Musashi's school on to his successor, his fourth son. Tadao Soke would pass away in 1688 when his son would take over the school completely. Unfortunately, the annals of time didn't pass down much of the verifiable writings from here until later in our story. The next 5 Soke for the Way of Two Swords as one were Yoshioka Masahiro, Santo Kiyohide, Santo Kiyokai, Santo Kiyotake, who is pictured here. The 8th Soke of Two Swords is one, the technique of Miyamoto Musashi, Aoki Hisakatsu. At only 6 years old, Aoki began practicing the Way of Two Swords under the aforementioned Kiyotake. In 1908, he succeeded his master after 21 years. Among his students, Aoki was very popular and was an avid swimmer. So much so that he would practice swimming in full samurai armor. His teachings took him to Taiwan in 1920, where he taught Miyamoto Musashi's art in private schools. It wasn't until 1947, after World War II, that he returned home to his country of Japan. With the turbulence going on in Japan, Aoki gave his relics from Musashi, the scroll and the wooden sword, passed down to a disciple for safekeeping. The year after the war, there was a ban on martial arts in Japan, banning judo, kendo, kyudo, and karate. The Way of Two Swords was effectively swept away with the ban as well. The directive was attempting to facilitate the, quote, removal and exclusion from the public life of militaristic and ultranationalistic persons, end quote. Teachers of the arts were forced to teach in secret, like that discussed in Gichin Funakashi's Karate-do, My Way of Life. He would go back to teaching in Japan, and his students Kiyonaga, Tadanano, and Gosho Motoharu would be thought him and succeeded him. The two students did a demonstration in Usa, Japan, marking a big return for the discipline of the Way of Two Swords. It wasn't until 1958, at least 11 years since returning to Japan without Musashi's swords and writings, that a student from Taiwan returned the relics to Aoki. In 1967, Aoki named Kiyonaga and Gosho both Soke of the school, splitting it in two as Musashi did 272 years earlier when he passed his teachings on to the brothers of Tadao. With the taking over of the school by the two, Aoki would only pass away 2 years later. The teachings began to split apart after the passing. Gosho Motoharu had the aim of keeping the teachings to what was handed down to him from Aoki in 1967, with Tadanao at his side. Then in 1976, Tadanao died and did not leave a successor, making Gosho the lone Soke for 8 months. Wanting to keep the lineage and dual Soke alive, the Kiyonaga family asked Gosho to prepare Imai Masuyake to be the 10th Soke, and Takanado's son, Kiyonaga Fumiya, would follow him as the 11th Soke. As Masayuki and Fumiya grew under Gosho's tutelage, a rift began between Masayuki and Gosho. Masayuki went about changing the kata as he took on more teaching roles at the school. Gosho wanted Aoki's teachings, the ones he believed to come from Musashi himself, to be preserved. Masayuki continued to search his different style, and in 2003 decided that the title of Soke would be done away with. Masayuki also decided that the 11th generation successors would be split again. As promised by Soko, Kiyonaga Fumiya, son of Kiyonaga Tanado, became a teacher, as well as Kin of Taiwan, a student of Aoki's. And finally, Iwame Toshio. Masayuki also put Musashi's sword, the one handed down for generations, at the Yusa Jingu Shrine. The Soke would have limited time to the writings and the sword to keep the history alive. Sadly, Fumiyama died only a year later. his students decided not to join under Toshio or Shinken. Instead, they returned to Gosho, who was still alive in 2004. Masayaki died in 2006. After Masayaki's death, the Kiyonaga family and the leaders of Gosho School met to discuss the lineage and reestablish one lineage of the Way of Two Swords in May of 2007. The decision saw the son of Gosho Motoharu, Yoshimori Kiyoshi, become the 12th successor of Miyamoto Musashi. Yoshimori had trained under Gosho since childhood and was, of course, a natural at the art. Masayaki had his successor still, though not recognized by the official Way of Two Swords school to this day. Not all were happy with Kiyoshi being named the sole leader of the Way of Two Swords. Fumiyama and Shinken's lineages merged again. The third leader, Iwami Toshio, denied the sole representation of the school as he was the one left out. The school was then in two factions, one led by Iwami Gensho, the student of Masayaki. The second was the son of Gosho Motoharu, Yoshimori Kiyoshi. In 2020, Yoshimori Kiyoshi, son of Gosho Motoharu, died. He left no successor to his teachings. From Kiyoshi to Gosho, tracing back even further to Ieoki, the Santo family, even further we go to Terao Katsuyuki, and then to Terao Nobuyuki, student of Miyamoto Musashi to himself. Finally, we get to Miyamoto Musashi, the man responsible for the entire 400-year lineage. The line worked to preserve Musashi's teachings, and now they are leaderless. That is not to say a leader for the lineage is not to be named. The school is still active and will eventually name someone. Or they could even merge. But with who? Iwami Masayaki. Masayaki's school continued on, and Iwami Gensho became the 11th successor of Miyamoto Musashi on his own branch. After years long in dispute with Kiyoshi and his line, the line of Iwami Gensho is all that is left. Today, Kazuya Takanori is the 12th successor of Miyamoto Musashi from Iwami Masayaki's lineage. Once seen as a heretic, Masayaki's line is the sole leader for the Way of Two Swords with an actual named successor, a Soke in the traditional terminology. On November 24th, 2013, Kazuya Takanori was named the headmaster and received the certificate of ownership. Takanori's dedication to the art lasted for years. He was originally a student of Masayaki and remained diligent under Iwami Gensho. He has an extensive background in several martial arts, including jiu-jitsu. Takanori still teaches the Way of Two Swords to this day in Japan while traveling the world to teach abroad. According to their website, there are 20 schools worldwide for the Way of Two Swords under Takanori's leads. Musashi's teachings may have evolved through Takanori and his predecessors, but the philosophy and spirit of Miyamoto Musashi live on. Miyamoto Musashi's influence on martial arts has been incredible. Putting weapon arts aside, martial artists around the globe adopt his tactics and philosophy. While the original line from Aoki, of which Gosho fought so hard to keep pure, is no longer led by a headmaster, Musashi tells us to accept everything the way it is. Kazuya Takanori is the head of the Way of Two Swords at this time. The other lineage may rise up and find its own leader in the near future, but Takanori is the one true leader as things sit right now. This isn't the traditional type of study I like to do for this channel, but I feel it was one that was quite needed. Miyamoto Musashi's teachings permeate 400 years after his passing. He inspires martial artists from Japan who practice the Way of Two Swords or Kendo to the biggest names in the UFC. Our lives pass us by, and most people are a blip in the radar. There are a select few who last through the generations. In our world, Sun Tzu, Milo of Croton, many of them are religious, Muhammad Ali, some are infamous, others are inventors. Musashi will be best known for his philosophy. His story and teachings permeate through that philosophy.